85% of employers say that upskilling is their top priority through to 2030. 71% of those same employers say that they will cut the budget for learning and development the second things get tight. Think about those two numbers again and tell me it makes sense, because I cannot figure it out. It doesn't make any sense. So today I want to sit with that contradiction. I have spent 20 years in learning and development, building some functions from scratch, literally walking into a business that has zero training, not even compliance training, and building up the function. So I've sat in boardrooms and watched this contradiction play out in real time. So let's talk about why it keeps happening, but more importantly, what you can do to stop it happening to you. So welcome back to the Capability Edge. If we haven't met yet, I am Candice Mitchell, the CEO of Talent Collective. And, if you're new here, this show is all about what it actually takes to build a career and a business that you're proud of, that you enjoy. Today's a solo episode, and I want to talk about what I've been sitting with for a long time now, which is weird and frustrating, yet completely predictable. This pattern where companies say skills are the top priority and then cut the very function responsible for building those skills, the second that things get hard. And if you are in learning and development, you probably know this feeling in your body already. You don't need me to explain it. You've probably lived through it. And maybe you're living it right now, right? Watching next year's budget discussions from the sideline, knowing that you're not in the room. So this episode is for you. I'm going to walk through why this keeps happening, my opinions, and based on my experiences, I'm going to tell you a few stories from my own work just to show that I know what it looks like, but I also know what it looks like when it doesn't happen, when budget does come your way because you're connecting to the business. And I'm also going to give you something concrete before your next planning cycle. And just a heads up, I wrote about this on my Substack, The Capability Edge by Candice Mitchell. So if you're wanting the numbers in front of you, or if you prefer to read things, or you want that actual one-pager template, you can go and get it over there. The link will be in the description of this episode. But rest assured, everything that you need to think through differently is going to be covered in this episode. All right, let's get into it. Section 1 covers the contradiction. And we'll cover that stat that you've probably seen everywhere, in every LinkedIn post, all of that. The World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, the headline says that 85% of employers say that upskilling their workforce is their number one priority, right? Let that just sink in. 85% of business leaders, employers of these Fortune 500 companies say that this is the most important thing for them right now. And 85%, that is basically everyone. So if you're in learning and development, your first reaction might be, phew, they finally get it. You breathe that sigh of relief. Somewhere up there in the C-suite, someone understands the value of developing skills, something that we have been saying since the beginning of time. And the data backs it up. Except in the same research cycle, about the same time that that beautiful number came into being, the Center for Creative Leadership did a separate piece of research, and they found that 71% of organizations expect to cut learning and development budgets. So 71%, that is more than 2 out of 3 employers. They just told you that upskilling was their top priority, not just in the list, their top priority, and in the same breath told you they're going to cut the budget. And here's another thing that completely threw me off. 82%, so in that same 85, the World Economic Forum, sorry, throwing lots of numbers at you, but 82% of those employers say that they know leadership development is effective. Not that they think it is, that they know it is. They know it drives results. Yet again, repeating myself, but it is so frustrating, they will cut your budget. And here's what I want you to just sit with for a second, because this is not a story about leadership not caring about development, or leadership just doesn't get it. They do. They get that it's important. And most leaders that I have worked with genuinely care. They genuinely care about their people and that their people are doing well. So this is a story about what gets protected when times get tough, when budgets get tight, and really what that protection requires. And look, it's not belief, it's not your passion for development, it's not some survey response, it's proof. And this isn't new, by the way. Every economic cycle, same thing happens. Back in the 2008 recession, more than half of the organizations cut learning and development budgets first. It was the first thing to go. And a 2023 study out of Cordell found that 75% of HR executives are already reshaping their learning and development strategy based on economic hard times and downturns. They were planning to spend less regardless of what the skills data was saying. So every cycle, the same thing happens. The commitment is real right up until someone has to decide what stays and what goes. And in learning and development, more cases than not, we don't have anything solid to hand over to make our case. So the question I'm going to answer today is not, why don't companies value skills? Because I think I've proven that they do. The question is, why does learning and development keep losing the argument when the money gets tight? And what does it actually take to stop losing that control? Moving on to section 2, I have a story to tell you, and it is my call center story. I want to tell you about this program I built because I think it shows you what it looks like when this works. I was brought into a brand new call center environment to build a capability program from scratch. And the timeline was brutal. 8 weeks until this call center launched. It was brand new. Not 8 weeks to plan it. 8 weeks to build it and get it into the hands of this new team, right? The people who are going to be on the phones every single day, dealing with real customers, real complaints, and real complexity. So why was I called in quite late to this whole project, right? 8 weeks until this call center launched. I couldn't have just thought about it. But as the program or as the project moved forward and they realized, yes, we're actually going to launch this thing and we're going to bring in, it was something like 62 brand new employees into this brand new call center that never existed before. We need some serious capability building for their first month, right? So I had 8 weeks to build this training. And then we ran the training. It was something like 27 days of training. Yeah. After that time, I can tell you that I had an actual crash where I slept for about 3 days. I struggled to actually get out of bed. So when I say this was all like rah-rah, like it took every ounce of energy from me, but it was so worth it. Within this project, I was the capability lead overall because the people coming in had to learn how to answer the phone, right? A phone in a call center is not just a simple pickup. They had to learn how to use the system so that the customer would actually come up on their computer. They had to learn the products, which were 28 different product configurations and troubleshooting each one of those. And then they also had to learn the human side of excellent customer experience. So we took them through, it was called ECE, Exceptional Customer Experience. And they had to gel as a team. And so it was very complex, all these moving pieces. But, I had a person specializing on the phone system. I had a person specializing on the software. I had a person specializing in the products and the troubleshooting, and a few other people. I worked across 6 different vendors. So all of this to say is we pulled it all together, but with one thing in mind, is that these people answering the phone had to know the person on the other side. It was rural South Africa, so they had very little computer skills, or some of them had never even owned a computer in their lives. So now they had this piece of hardware that would sometimes crash, and how to speak through that. And what the company wanted was a over 80% first call resolution. So what that means is that we want the person who picks up the phone to be able to answer a myriad of different problems so that you don't get rerouted to different, specialist functions. So everyone in the call center had to all be brought up to the same level. We didn't say, okay, you're this product specialist, you're that product specialist. No, everyone had to be brought up. And with the goal in mind, because it was very tricky, because some of the vendors were there for a long time working with the business. I was brand new as an external consultant coming in. And even some of the internal people did not agree on having a call center in the first place, right? Their work was going to be reduced because they would actually drive to customers. And so they thought they were being put out of a job. So again, a lot of different complexities coming in, but we were all working towards that 80% first call resolution. And we knew why, right? We knew why, because the people calling in were probably nervous calling in the first place. And so they don't want to be rerouted to various people. And they would even get to know the call center agents a little bit, if they called multiple times. So I did not focus on building out what the training would look like day to day for this month-long learning program. I focused on what the leadership were measuring, which was that 80% first call resolution. We built all the things, we worked together, worked through our problems and our differences, and we kicked off that month of learning, and the call center started. And a month into the call center, we hit that 82% first call resolution. It was such a monumental success and celebration at the time. It was truly a wonderful project, and just from beginning to end. And here's why I'm telling you this story in this context. Because 8 weeks is not a long time to prove anything, right? We always think capability takes time. It's going to take us a year to prove this. It's going to take us even 2 years to prove some leadership development is actually making any headway, or, causing any results to shift. But in those 8 weeks, or let's call it 12 because of the month that it actually deployed, in that time frame, in that very short time frame, we proved something anyway, because we started with the business outcome first. We did not start with the content. And that is basically the whole shift I want you to take away from this episode. Stop starting with what you have to teach them. Start with what has to shift, and then work backwards from there. In section 3, I want to take you through another very different example so that you can pick out what works for you. This is my clean energy roadmap, I will call it. So I want to give you the other side of this spectrum, right? The first example of the call center was heading up a capability for a very specific thing and a very specific learning solution. With this other client in the clean energy space, it was not a solution, but it was rather a coming together of the business to put together their capability plan. And I'll talk you through exactly how I did that. So I built a 3-year capability plan for this business that had truly 12 businesses sitting under it. So it didn't diversify, it didn't go through M&A or anything like that, but essentially there were 12 very distinct lines of business that each had their own business goals. Each of them were at various stages in their people development, and they wanted me to come in so that they had a sort of company-wide true north, so to speak, for their capability plan. And it took me a total of 14 weeks to build out this. It was a 2-year plan that had a 3-year kind of placeholder. And what really worked for me in this situation was that I took time to understand the business. I did some deep industry analysis. I interviewed senior leadership, all 12 of those business unit heads and their direct reports. I ran focus groups to really understand what the people were going through and their day-to-day realities. They were global, so I interviewed people in Africa and Asia and Australia and Europe and America to even understand the sort of cultural nuances across this business. And what made the roadmap work wasn't that I had this pre-made template that I copied and pasted 12 times across the 12 business units. It was that I took my time to understand the business well enough and the industry well enough and the people well enough. Because if you're in clean energy or anything future focused, you're not worried about the skills your people need today. You're worried about the longevity of your business and making an impact 5, 10 years down the line. And what capability do the people need to set you up for success in that situation? Because they're managing a workforce that's shifting under regulatory change today, technology change tomorrow, and a talent scarcity the next day. So the roadmap wasn't built around what training existed or what training was missing. There was no training needs analysis that I did. It was built around where the business was going, where the industry was going, and what capability was required in the workforce to get it there. And I tell you this story because people often hear strategic learning and development, and they think slower, more bureaucracy, more meetings, but it isn't. Strategic means that the work is aimed at something real, and 14 weeks to build a 3-year capability roadmap is not slow. It's extremely fast. And it was possible because every decision made was anchored to something that the business actually needed, not to a request that came from a manager or, like I like to say, the loudest leader in the room. Let's shift gears into section 4, the real reason learning and development gets cut first. Okay, so let's get to the actual answer that you've been sticking around for this whole time, because I promised you I'd tell you why this keeps happening and I don't want to dance around it. So you are getting cut because leadership doesn't value learning. I know, crazy. I need you to actually hear this though, because I think a lot of us in this profession carry around this like resentment that nobody up there cares. And it's just not true, or at least it's not the whole truth. What's true is that your function is filed under things we're doing rather than things that are critical to our success. Think about what actually gets protected when budgets get cut. Sales gets protected because if it disappeared, revenue would stop by next month. And everyone can clearly see that line and how it connects. Finance gets protected because if finance disappeared tomorrow, the business literally could not run. Legal gets protected for the same reason. L&D gets cut because if it disappeared tomorrow, most leadership teams genuinely cannot tell you what would break. Not in revenue, not in retention, and not in how long it takes someone to become fully productive in their role. Not in whether the company can still attract the people in it. Nobody has drawn that line for them. And if nobody has drawn that line for them, the function doesn't feel essential. It feels optional, nice to have, and that gets cut first. And honestly, this isn't a fairness issue that you can argue your way out of. Unfortunately, you cannot out-argue a spreadsheet with a feeling, no matter how true that feeling is. And believe me, I know, because I feel so passionately about learning and development that I have made this argument many times based on this isn't fair, you need us, you'll see, but none of that will actually land with leadership. So what you need instead is proof. Proof that connects what you build to what actually changed. And that proof exists before the cut conversation happens. It does not get thrown together in a panic after someone's already asking, because by then L&D is already on the list and it is too late. And I want to say this part 3 times because I think it needs to land. It is not a mindset shift. It is not a better training catalog. It is not a louder case for why learning matters. It's proof built ahead of time that shows exactly what would break without you. And look, I know building that proof feels like a whole different skill set and a whole different job on top of everything else that you're doing. And it is. And that's exactly why I built a framework for it, because I got tired of watching genuinely good learning and development leaders lose an argument they were right about, simply because no one had ever shown them how to make the case in language the business already speaks. I lay out the entire thing, spoke by spoke, on the Capability Edge over in Substack. And if you want the one-pager version, you can literally print and bring into your next budget meeting. That's there for paid subscribers, because I'm going to walk you through the whole thing right now. But because you shouldn't have to pay to understand your own function's value. Getting a bit tongue-tied there. But I'm going to walk you through the whole thing right now, because you shouldn't have to pay to understand your own function's value. But if you want the print-out version, then that is available in the Capability Edge over on Substack. Moving into section 5. Why this is getting worse and not better. And before I get into my next story, I want to bring in one more piece, because I think it explains why this problem is actually accelerating now and not easing up. Part of my master's thesis was this exact question. what it takes for learning and development to stay relevant inside an AI integrated workplace, right? That's rapidly changing and all of that. And I talk about this a lot with my brother, who's a senior AI integration person at a major tech company. So I get pretty unfiltered advice and a pretty unfiltered view from him and what's actually happening on the technology side of things. So, not the hype cycle version that everyone is posting about. And what he keeps telling me consistently is that AI scales inside organizations, but the thing that stays the most valuable, the thing that doesn't get replaced, is our human uniqueness, our experiences, our relationships, even our ability to have relationships and create relationships, the ability to read what's in the room and what the room actually needs from us. So the stuff that never shows up on a spreadsheet. And here's why that matters for everything we've been talking about. If human capability is becoming the actual differentiator as AI infiltrates absolutely everything, then learning and development is sitting on the exact function, is the exact function that builds the one thing that companies cannot automate. And instead of leaning into that, most companies are still treating learning and development as a nice to have at the exact moment that it should be leaning in to learning and development like it's critical infrastructure. And that, if I'm being honest with you, is the part that keeps me up at night. And by that, I literally mean I lie awake tossing and turning because I'm like, oh my gosh, we need humans so badly, and we need humans and their capability and what we're made to do, right? Connect and talk and make each other not feel lonely and network and, all the things that just make us human. And this worries me because the very function that should be getting more resourced as AI scales is the one getting cut first. And this is not a coincidence. That's a company that hasn't caught up to what's actually happening. And it's a learning and development team that hasn't moved forward into what the business is needing of you right now. Section 6 is the acquisition story, and it is the last story I want to share with you that just brings this all to life. So I was brought into a financial services firm as a consultant, and in about, I was there for about a year, and they were going through an acquisition. And this is the most fragile time within a company. Headcount shifts, cultures collide with other cultures, and people are scared for their jobs, even though no one has lost their jobs. And leadership is under enormous pressure to prove that the deal was worth it. So in about 6 weeks, that firm went from about 250 people to about 750 people. So triple the headcount in about 6 weeks. And obviously there were talks before that, but 6 weeks is when rubber hit the road and these people were pulled in. So if you have ever tried to onboard even 10 new people, well, you know that number is just pure chaos. And so all these new people joined, and I had already rolled out our firm-wide capability program, and we pulled them in to that program as is. So we just kept running it and pulled in all these new people. And in the first month, we actually hosted these partner kickoff sessions, and we had 82%, or it might have been 84, forgive me if I have the number wrong, but 82 or 84% of the partners attended these kickoff sessions. Now, that signals to me that they are genuinely invested in their people's development. And here's the piece that links all of this together. So this wasn't the first time I'd interacted. I had a long running contract with this firm for about 3 years. And it is my positioning that gets these highly skilled, highly paid, billable people to give up their time to attend development. And whenever I get a chance to speak to leadership, I reinforce the messaging, which is you're operating in a competitive environment and you need to retain these people. You employ people who are highly educated and expensive. So losing them costs you a lot of money. So the investment in development is a no-brainer for them, right? You can't pull the wool over the eyes of financial people, right? I cannot make up some numbers and some things and some stories and they're going to buy in. Like that's just not how it works. So I had to be very deliberate of these are the numbers. This is the average that it costs to lose a person and replace them, someone that you want. And development is tied with pay, the number one reason people stay at an organization, because they feel invested in. And because I have those conversations, I have the buy-in. And I want to be clear that the value is visible. I talk about it all the time in these partner kickoff sessions, in any opportunity I get to be in a boardroom, or when I traveled and visited the managing partners. I am very clear about the value that this program adds and the fact that it is not a once-off training event. It is built to support the capability that this firm needs going forward. And the difference in that is that this is not a once-off very good program, right? This is learning and development built to matter across every part of what the business actually was going through. Okay, now we're getting into the meat of this. Section 7 is the framework. So let's talk about how you actually build that kind of case for your own function, learning and development, because I don't want you to leave with just stories, but I think the stories illustrate the point and that it can work across various business types and various projects that you're working on. So I built something called the 5-spoke impact model. And the whole point of it is to stop learning and development from being seen as just this narrow slice of the business, the training slice, right? And start showing leadership everywhere it's already touching and the outcomes, because that's what they care about. So there are 5 areas and I want to walk you through them. The first spoke is attract and keep the right people. So learning and development is a magnet for top talent, whether anyone's calling it that or not. It signals growth. It shows people the company is investing in them, not just extracting from them. Strong onboarding, visible career paths, development that's baked into what it means to work there. That's learning and development showing up in recruitment and retention numbers, even though nobody puts it on the recruiting budget line. The second spoke is build capability at every level. This is the one people think of first when they think of learning and development. And right, it's not wrong. It's just incomplete on its own. This is about defining what skills actually matter and building them from brand new hires all the way up to senior leaders with a clear framework behind it, so it's not just a pile of disconnected courses. The third spoke is to make high performance possible. This is the day-to-day stuff that doesn't always get called learning, but absolutely is. Job aids, playbooks, coaching systems, the things that remove friction so people can actually do their jobs well, not just once in a training session, but every single day they show up. The fourth spoke is increase agility and spark innovation. This one matters more than ever right now. Companies are moving through such massive change. And learning and development's job here is building the mindset and the environments that let people take smart risks, get curious instead of defensive, and keep moving instead of freezing when things shift underneath them. And the fifth spoke is elevate the employee experience. This is about how people feel about their work, meaningful onboarding, real recognition, a sense of purpose and connection. This one gets dismissed as soft sometimes, and it is absolutely not soft. It's directly tied to whether people stay, whether they bring their best thinking, whether the culture actually holds under pressure. And when you can show leadership that you are playing a role in all five, you are not just the mere training slice of the pie. And that's the difference between learning and development as a cost center versus learning and development as a strategic partner that is critical to the business's success. The last section, section 8, this is what I would do this week. This is a bit of a bonus section. The thing I'm not going to make you go dig up somewhere else. This is what I would tell you if I was sitting across the table from you right now. First, pick one program on the training calendar right now, just one, and ask yourself honestly, could you defend it if someone in the next leadership meeting asked what would break without it? And if you can't answer that, make sure you can. Second, go back through the 5 spokes we just spoke through, and look at all the ways that program that you identified in step 1 touches on those 5 spokes. And you'll be surprised that your program probably touches on 2 or even more spokes, but definitely more than just the capability one. Let's take onboarding, for example, right? We think onboarding, it's just welcoming new employees, but it has a role in retention and attraction. It's also performance enablement, and it's also culture. So start describing it like that. Third, go and find the number. And I'm not talking about a learning number. I'm talking about a business-related number. This could be retention, time to productivity, for first call resolution rate, reduced turnover in the first 90 days. So whatever that looks like in your world, go and find that number and start tracking it today. And fourth, start saying it out loud, right? Your manager, the people who attended, some key stakeholders. Start talking about what would break if this program disappeared tomorrow. Again, onboarding is a real simple example, but if onboarding disappeared, people would take longer to get up to speed with what they have to do in the business. There would definitely be a disconnect. Communication would break down because everyone's not on the same page. And your turnover in the first 90 days is very likely to increase, which has a number attached to it. So, go one step further and figure that out. If your turnover in the first 90 days increases by 1%, what would that cost the business? And honestly, not once has a client pushed back on me asking about these things, leaning into these things, talking about these things, even presenting these things at board meetings. They care whether it's accurate, and they care whether it will actually change behavior and whether it has the impact that you're saying it will. And I can promise you it will absolutely change your next budget conversation. In closing, I want to leave you with this. Full circle. If 85% of employers will tell you that skills are their number 1 priority, that number is real. It's not nothing. But being called a priority does not protect your budget. What protects it is proof. Proof that what you're building is actually working, shown in the language that the business speaks. If you want the full 5-spoke model represented visually with all of the information about each spoke, again, you can download that in my Substack this week, the Capability Edge, and you will see the 85% say it's a priority, then why is learning and development still being cut? That's what the article is called. Again, I will link it under the description in this episode. And cheers to the ones who are tired of defending a function that nobody else understands and who are done finding out that their budget got cut in a meeting they weren't even in. You know your work matters. Now, go make it impossible to overlook. See you next time.